No, Mick, you need to get closer.
Oh my God.
That's more like it.
God's people are in trouble. They're in big trouble. And I say big in terms of the giant called Goliath, who's over 9 feet tall. And he comes to Israel every morning as a nation and he totally mocks them over and over again. And as you can imagine, all of Israel are absolutely terrified. Every day he comes forward and challenges, who's going to come out and fight me, he more or less says. And Israel more or less stand in a corner shaking like, not me, not me. They couldn't find anybody who's big enough and brave enough to take on Goliath. Everybody knows that story really, really well. Day after day, 40 days, he comes forward and challenges God's people. And like I said, nobody is brave enough to come forward. But it's then we're reminded of the hero in the story. It isn't so much Goliath as David. And if you remember in the story, David's father actually sent him to the front line to his brothers to give them some food. And so he goes there and gives them some food, and what happens? His brothers actually end up mocking him, saying, what are you doing here? This is no place for a little shepherd's boy like you. You need to get going back. But as David gets closer and closer, he hears this voice of this uncircumcised giant, if you wish, mocking God's people. And when everybody else is terrified, David says, I'll fight him. And you know the story. He goes to Saul, and Saul is like, oh, what can you do, a little shepherd's boy? So they armour him up. They put actually weights of armour on him with a helmet. And David's like, what is this? It doesn't even fit me. So he declines wearing all of that stuff. And he goes to Goliath, equipped with 5 stones that he took from the brook earlier. Five stones? We'll get into that in a second. But isn't that amazing? That while all of Israel were petrified looking at Goliath because of his size, David, the little shepherd boy, who's used to fighting with lions and bears, he's the one that comes forward who has no fear. I'm wondering what kind of giants you're facing right now. Because we all have them, some are bigger than others, but we all have our giants in our life. You know, maybe it's illness or a loss, or maybe you're struggling with your job and about to lose the job and you don't know how you're going to pay for your bills. Maybe it's a marriage breakdown you're going through right now and you just can't see a way forward for it. We all have our challenges, we all have our giants. But if we learn anything, I think David teaches us 3 short little lessons that I think that could help us face our giants. First of all, we need to remember that the Lord is with us. That's first and foremost. We all have, like I said, good intentions. And David had a good intention to go and feed his brothers. And while his brothers wanted to argue with him, David thought, well, actually, I'm not going to waste my time arguing with you because there's a bigger battle to fight. And his name is Goliath. Listen to what he says in 1 Samuel 17. He said, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hands of this Philistine. You see, David was very much aware that when he goes to fight, he's not fighting on his own. The Lord is with him. He's confident, but he's not confident in his own ability. He's confident in God's ability to work through him. And that again is where humility comes in for Christians when we're facing our giants. To have the humility to say, God, I can't do this on my own, but I trust that you're going to be with me. And yes, you're going to feel scared. And yes, you're going to think this giant is way too big for me to handle. Well, in a sense, that's a good thing. Because when we come to our senses to realise that most of life's challenges are giants, we really need to come to our senses and understand that with God, all things are possible. God is with us. I think the second lesson we can learn from David is that faith in God brings courage. I mentioned earlier that David went to the brook and he got 5 smooth stones. And the question is, well, why smooth stones? Well, I guess for aerodynamic reasons that would be great. You know, for the sling that is going to fly through the air a lot better, so you'll be a lot more accurate. And remember, like I said, David's killed bears and lions with the same technique, so he knows exactly what he's doing. But why 5 stones? Well, there are many theories concerning why David took 5 stones. I think one theory I kind of like is that David recognised that Goliath had 4 other brothers. This is kind of hinted at in 2 Samuel 21 and 1 Chronicles 20, And in there it kind of talks about Goliath's brothers, who were also giants. 4 of them it mentions. The text is a little speculative, so whether it is or not. But I like David's thinking here. If it is David's brothers, and David has them in mind, hence why he takes the 5 stones, then isn't that telling us how forward-thinking David is? David's thinking, you know what? I know I could take out Goliath with 1 stone. I know I could do that with the Lord's help. But what if his brothers come out straight at the back of that after I've killed him? So David's thinking forward. And that's what faith does. Faith helps us to think big. It helps us to think forward and to look for any unexpected things. And so when David meets Goliath, listen to what he says. He says, "Ye come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I have come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." You see, what stood before David was a physical man, over 9 feet tall, who was armoured up to the hilt, if you wish. But David saw beyond that. He saw a man. He saw a giant that was so big that there was no way he could miss him. And so, as we know, David takes one of the stones from his bag, he slingshots and hits him between the eyes. Goliath goes down. And so David goes over and finishes him off, more or less by cutting his head off. But the story still applies for us today. That no matter what giant we face, God has given us the ability to overcome them. God has given us a promise that they might be big in our eyes, but not in His eyes. So let me encourage you to think about that. It takes courage to face giants. But when you face them, pray about it. Think about what God can do in a scenario like this. Read His Word and be encouraged with stories like David and Goliath, because they're not just fairy tales. They're there to teach. They're there to encourage us. They're there to remind us that whatever we face, God will give us the courage to go forward.
Because my video quality is quite. If you stand over there and do it, and then I will do it.
As Christians, it's sometimes difficult to accept that every trial we go through prepares us for the next. And so it's the same with the giants that we face. We face them and think we can't get through them, but yet we do, with God's help. And with every giant we defeat comes along a bigger giant. But the experience from the defeating the first giant helps us face the next. And that's the third thing we can learn from David. And it's not simply this. With God, nothing is impossible. Listen to what happens here in the story. As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. I mean, isn't this incredible? Where if it was you and I, we would be running the opposite direction, wouldn't we? We saw this giant of a guy coming towards us, we were running. But notice the text says that they're running towards David, and David didn't run away like a little schoolboy. Oh, no. He ran towards him. And that's because he recognized that with God, all things are possible. Nothing is impossible for God. And we know the end of the story, like I said. He pulled out the stone, he hits Goliath between the head, and he goes over and cuts his head off. And we all live happily ever after, so to say. But think about this. We could almost hear the Israelites saying to King Saul, just surrender. Just give in to the Philistines. There's nobody could beat this guy called Goliath. We could imagine even the Israelites saying, oh, this young shepherd boy, David, I mean, what is he going to do? I can imagine them laughing and joking about it. But God chose David, this little shepherd boy, for a reason. One, like we said, he looked at Goliath through his own eyes. He looked at them through God's eyes and come to the conclusion with God, all things are possible. So let me remind you, whatever you're facing in life right now, whatever giant it is you're going to face in the future, what looks impossible to you is possible for God. Let me encourage you to stay focused on Him. Let me encourage you to remind you that God is with you every step of the way. And He will help you through all the challenges of life that come your way. God bless you, and may He strengthen you through His word.